Call this meeting to order. And this is going to, it's 5, right? Michael.
Good evening. Mayor DeLong, members of the council. The work session tonight, as you know, is about the calendar year 2023 water and sewer rates. We have with us Mr. Tom Beckley with Raftellus. Just a quick recap. Rates were presented last year, or not just for the current year, but all the way out through 2027 to look at strengthening the position in the water and sewer funds financially. We presented in the memo the proposed rate increases, the one that was approved a year ago, as well as what was proposed a year ago. Mr. Beckley will speak to that in a few minutes. We just wanted to touch on, again, historically, the two kind of options presented last year were to continue transfers from the gaming fund, or doing so to subsidize water and sewer, or in line with the strategic plan, working to end the transfers from the gaming fund, which, as I understand and which was shown, is what the council did. But with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Beckley, and we'll go from there.
Here we go. Thank you. So I have a very brief presentation because, just kind of one kind of introductory comment is, we didn't do a full update of the rate study this year like we did last year. Basically, staff asked us to come in and basically confirm things had happened as we expected from last year's increase, and does it look like we can still kind of go along the plan that we presented last year in terms of rate increases. And as Mr. Nichols said, when we were here last year, it was August last year, so 11 months ago, we presented two options. And at that time, scenario one was lower increases, but still increases to both water and sewer, and basically weaning each utility off of using gaming fund revenue. So at the end of the 5-year plan, we would get the utilities to the point where they were not being supported by gaming fund revenue, but there was still support from gaming fund in the earlier years of that financial plan. And then the second option that was presented last year were larger increases that would allow the utilities to more quickly eliminate the gaming fund subsidy for each of the utilities. And certainly, especially in the water side, we've used the gaming fund to pay for a lot of the large improvements, especially at the water plant in the past few years. And so, but there's been other subsidies to the utilities as well, and that's basically, what was decided in last year. This council elected scenario 2. We implemented the rate increases then, and so, what we're presenting tonight is a continuation of that scenario 2 that was opted last year, which is to continue to get the utilities as quickly as possible off that subsidy. And really, one thing I probably mentioned last year and that I often mention, when we do studies like this for utilities is each of these utilities is, should be thought of as a self-supporting business, each one supporting itself, paying for itself. And really, that's what the rates we're proposing do, is they get each utility to be a self-supporting business so that the users of each utility are supporting that utility. It's not being supported by a gaming fund, general tax revenue, or any other source. It's really a self-supported business, and that's really what we're trying to get to with what we're presenting tonight. So in terms of the water utility financial plan, you can see this, again, this is the scenario 2 from last year, and we implemented a 20% increase on water last year, and the proposal was for a 20% increase on water this year. And one thing to keep in mind is that prior to last year, we had lowered the water rates 24%. And I say we, that was the city. That was not a recommendation we made. It was something that the council elected to do subsequent to the study we had done about 5 years ago now. We had, proposed small rate increases on water, but instead what happened is, as we had to increase sewer rates, it was decided, hey, we do have some room to roll back water rates, but basically now we're in a position where we're having to undo those rate decreases and, cover the increased costs that have happened. And so that's why on the water side we're faced with, relatively large rate increases, despite the fact that we have subsidized the water utility with gaming fund revenue for large capital projects. And then next year it's expected that we would need The plan was a 15% increase. And the word of caution here, the discussion we had with city staff over the past month was we could possibly, say these rate increases even this year could be higher to offset the inflation that the utilities are dealing with, just like everybody else. But, based on a review of the financial condition of each utility and where we're at, we can get by with the rate increases we proposed last year, but we will need to take a look in 12 months' time. Can we really get by with what we thought, or is inflation? And fortunately, we are in a position where we can weather it for another 12 months, but it's something to keep in mind is that we may end up with some of the inflationary pressures that everybody else is dealing with on the utilities as well. The sewer utility, last year we implemented a 25% increase. This year we need a 20% increase, but we get down to what I would call more normal levels of 7% increases going out. And one thing to keep in mind with the sewer utility is we have a lot less control over our costs on the sewer utility because a vast majority of the money we generate in the sewer utility, we're just basically passing on to the city of Kansas City to pay for treatment services, and they raise their rates about 7% every year. So we really don't have much flexibility even in the out years. That's why in the out years, you still see 7% increases instead of the 4% we eventually get to on water. We have a lot more control over the finances of our water utility because we control everything, from beginning to end. Whereas with the sewer utility, really we're responsible for collection, and then we have to pay the city of Kansas City for treatment. Yes.
I was going to ask, when do they approve that in Kansas City?
When do they approve their rate increases?
Yeah, when do they do their commercial rate?
So they're on a funky fiscal year. Their fiscal year starts May 1st every year. And so their rate increases go in effect on May 1st each year.
In this last year, we did get hit with a 7%.
I'd have to go back and look exactly what it is, but that's about what it's been for the past several years as they deal with the combined sewer overflow issues.
Okay, Councilmember Smith.
Did we also have a chance to audit that meter, the flow meter that doubled our sewer bill when we installed the new one?
That would be a better question for
Sure.
Anthony. Is he here?
There he is. Anthony.
Yeah, yes, in a way, yes. We had the company that installed it, looked at it. We had our on-call engineer look at it as well, and there was nothing we could find that varied from what it should be.
Well, dang.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So fortunately, at least on sewer, after this year, we don't expect the same high level of increase. Next year on water, as I already showed you, we do need a slightly larger increase. And again, water is a little more being driven by the fact that we lowered rates for several years to offset large sewer increases, and literally we're undoing the rate increases plus covering increased costs for the water utility. So in terms of what this looks like for our customers, an important aspect to keep in mind is, and this is something we mentioned last year, North Kansas City utility bills are low relative to other communities in the region, and they will still be low after these increases. And even after the increases we need next year will be low to middle of the pack. Because, as you can see here in this comparison, we're the lowest of all these, communities around us and other communities in the region. And it's still, it's a pretty affordable service despite, I know 20% can give people sticker shock, but fortunately, it's, compared to other cities, it's still relatively low. One other thing we want to talk about briefly was, one of the things driving these rate increases, that I want to make sure council is aware of is that our fund balances are getting depleted, especially on the water side after we did those rate decreases. And you can see to end this year, even with that 20% increase, we are expecting a drawdown of fund balance even with that 20% increase. And so it's not like the water utility is not generating excess revenue even with that rate increase. It's really just to keep us from getting too low. Now, of course, we talk a lot about gaming fund here, and even, that's one reason your utilities are even able to do this, because a lot of other communities wouldn't be comfortable with this, without that safety net, if you will. That we're fortunate to have that safety net. But it is, you can see, even with the proposed increases, the water utility still kind of doesn't get to the point that we'd like them to, which is about, what we're recommending is 25% fund balance for operation, maintenance, and debt service. Well, we don't really have debt service. Operation, maintenance expense, which is really just saying we want to make sure we have a reasonable amount of the money in the bank to cover unforeseen emergencies and just, timing differences, expense versus revenue. If we have a real cool, wet summer, then that can, that would cause our revenue to drop. So that's really what we're trying to get to the point of. And similarly, sewer is already, in a pretty bad position, and really the sewer increases just are digging us out of that, a pretty low cash position. And so that's what we're proposing, yes.
Okay. Do we have a policy amount of days cash that we're looking for? I don't generally speak days cash.
Yeah, 90 days, 25%, which is about 3 months, is
Okay,
what
so-
kind of based on, working with staff, that's what we're shooting for on each of the utilities.
What
And
was our policy? Is our policy 30% or 20%? I didn't think it was 25.
I believe it's 25.
Is it 25? Oh, is it?
I didn't
why-
know how that translated to days cash. I'm just curious.
I'm blaming Mike.
It's nice to have more than 90. Obviously, more is better, but is there a point where, we're going to be pushing 7% every year with the Kansas City piece? But if we get up to 121 days cash and that line keeps going up,
Yeah, then certainly we'll look at them in the future. And there's another piece on the sewer side that we're looking at which is the extra strength surcharges, because we've gotten a little out of whack on the extra strength surcharges. And there's some challenges with the data that we have, and we're working with the city to kind of make sure that those are where they need to be, because that's actually a pretty significant piece of both the revenue and the expense side, and we're making sure that it's in line, because there were some things that were happening in the past that those are a little out of whack. But that shouldn't affect the overall increase too much, but it is something we are working with city staff to look at.
So those are the bio-auction demand suspended solid surcharges. How far out of whack are those?
Well, so at one point, and this wasn't, in a decision we were involved in, a decision was made that basically said, well, we know we're getting extra strength surcharges from Ingredion and a couple other large industrial customers. But they're being watered down by the domestic flows of the rest of the city. But what's happened is we've gotten to the point where what we're collecting from Ingredion and the other industrial customers is not covering what we're paying Kansas City. So there needs to be better alignment with what's in our ordinances with what we're actually being charged Kansas City for these.
Do we have an idea of what that gap is, though?
What we're examining is, we do in total dollars, but the challenge we're having is that it's, basically when we do rates, there's two key pieces: how much it costs us and how much we're selling. It's the how much we're selling that we really have to dig into more, because the units, there's some discrepancies in the units. And Ingredion's units have been changing a lot. And so that's what we need to get a better handle on. And Ingredion is a vast majority of those.
Just out of curiosity, what is that dollar figure amount, though? That first billing versus what we're billing?
I'd have to go back and look. It's
Okay.
on the order of like $1 million.
That,
Just the high strength surcharge.
but between what Kansas
Some
City,
years.
Missouri is billing us, and then
Oh,
what we are
the
collecting and
difference.
billing.
No.
Yes, okay, the difference.
Several hundred thousand.
The difference.
now. Yeah.
Okay, there we
hundreds of
go.
Thousands. Sorry.
If we're off $1 million on that discrepancy, that's
No, and that's what drove it, is there was a large increase in the amount even we were getting
There we
charged
go.
by
Okay.
Kansas City over time. And but now it's decreasing again, and that's why we're really making sure that the units of service are correct on that.
okay. Perfect. Do we know? Is there a timeline on when we're gonna?
Before next year
have-
is what we're shooting for.
Yes. We're working on what
We're
that
gonna-
scope of service looks like, and we'll be bringing it forward to city council for your approval soon.
When do we update the rate? And then I'll get to you. I know. I see you coming. When do we have to update the rates on the suspended solids and not bio-auction demand surcharges? Is there a set period that we do that, or we can do that?
Well, that's up to
anytime?
council. What happened last year is we didn't change them last year, and because we knew there was this challenge, and we need to focus on addressing that now.
One final question, and then I'll get to Councilmember Saper. They charge a third surcharge, I believe, which is an oil and grease surcharge as well. We don't collect anything on that end. What is our bill amount that we get from Kansas City on that monthly?
I'd have to go back and look at that one. That one is less significant, as I recall.
I figured it was. I'm just curious what the number was.
And oil and grease, even though many communities call it a surcharge, it really doesn't work the same as the high-strength surcharges. High-strength surcharges are a real thing that can be measured. oil and grease, even though some people call it a surcharge, it's really more of a penalty. It's not cost of service based like the surcharge, the suspended solids and BOD, COD
Yeah.
are. And, but a lot of communities will kind of treat it like it is, but it actually isn't.
Okay.
So you have to be careful with that one.
Perfect, thank you. Councilmember Saper, unless I took your question there.
No, you did not.
Okay.
My question is, can you explain high-strength surcharges and what they are?
Absolutely. Well, I am not an engineer, but from the perspective of somebody who determines the rates, I can give you, I'm not an engineer anymore, I should say, but basically there is extra cost in the treatment of BOD and COD in terms of, big one could be chemicals and electricity and what it costs at the plant. Plus, they result in solids being created. And one of the biggest, a big variable cost of a wastewater treatment plant is handling solids. Total suspended solids are exactly like they sound. They're solids, and you have to settle them out, and then then they result in a solid as well that has to then be disposed of. And so there are specific costs that can be identified in the cost of service process that are allocable to, to the increased cost of treating those, and that's what it recovers. Domestic strength is kind of the generic term for what we would expect from a house or, somebody with just a bathroom and cooking and regular cooking. And that would be, 200 to 300 milligrams per liter is the strength, whereas an Ingredion is putting in sometimes 5 times that amount into their flow. And so Kansas City is charging us for it, and we recover it from Ingredion. But there's been a disconnect. The simplest approach for us to do would be for us to just charge exactly what Kansas City charges. And that's what we're going to look at exactly as what the relationship of our surcharge should be to Kansas City's surcharge, because there's a pass-through. And like I said, what happened at one point is it wasn't something that we did in a study, but there was a decision made, it appears that Ingredion and other industries are being watered down by the other customers, so we don't have to charge them the same amount Kansas City's charging us, whereas that may not be the case any longer.
And that scope of service that I mentioned earlier, that is exactly the technical assistance we are going to be asking from Raftellus to help us understand that.
Councilmember Smith.
Is there a way to sub-meter for something like that? Just install a meter off of Ingredion's flow leg?
So that's something we're working with Anthony and his staff about, because there is a metering program, and and that will be part of our discussions with Anthony and the staff, is exactly how that should be handled. I can tell you, for example, that there are some places when they're as large as Ingredion where the answer may be simply a 24/7, 365 monitoring of the stream instead of more periodic monitoring. But there's cost associated with that, and that's why it's not done. There's cost and construction, and that's something that needs to be worked out. Or just making sure that we're comfortable that the data we're getting is reliable. Because another challenge is Ingredion's flow has been changing. It hasn't been very consistent the past couple of years, and that again is something that we're trying to get a handle on. And there's other surcharge customers too. I'm not trying to blame Ingredion for this.
Yeah, they're 80% of our, they're a
They are a
big chunk.
huge part of it, but there are some other surcharge customers that are not insignificant. There's a couple others.
Sure.
No, I know I brought that up several times before, because as that gap continues to widen, everyone else is covering that, and they're not putting that in the system.
Which
Yes.
is, again, one of the reasons why we're going to be bringing forward an agreement to help us better understand.
Yeah.
Because it is very nuanced, and a lot of it really is specific to North Kansas City, so.
Thank you. All right.
That's
No,
the end
there
of
we
my prepared presentation, actually. So, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Councilmember Smith.
Yep, I&I, do we know, I know that I asked about it last time, I'm not sure if that's part of your scope, but just as an example, I bought a house, and the sump pump, when I bought it, was plumbed directly into the sewer system. That's a lot of water that we're paying to have treated. I pushed it outside, but if people aren't doing that, that's costing us big money.
So that will, and again, I'm going to look at Anthony.
Yeah.
Did the sanitary sewer study address how much I&I there is in the system?
Which,
The master plan.
well, that's next year.
That's
Yeah.
next
So that's kind of what I was going to
Okay.
say, is
Okay,
like
is
next
that-
year.
that's coming?
We're looking at that, yeah. If you look the proposed budget next year has a sanitary sewer master plan. It also has a separate sub-metering I&I plan program for basically dividing the city up into 3 different sections, different sub-basins to see where we're getting the most I&I and then going after those areas. Also, last year, what we did, sorry.
No.
Through our sewer program, we find those, we replace them when we can. We bought a sewer camera last year that helps us kind of visually observe the system and do inspections for those. So we kind of have an ongoing program for that, but next year it's really going to ramp up with the studies.
Do we have an idea, like during heavy rains, how much more flow we see through the sewer meter?
It can vary depending on the type of storm we get, also varying on the location where the
We've
storm
actually done
flies.
some regression analysis internally, and we actually cannot find a substantial
Difference.
linkage between the two. I've run several regressive analysis myself on the meters to try to find a correlation, and I can't find anything statistically valid internally. We're hoping that with the stormwater master plan as well as the sewer master plan, we'll be able to have an understanding. But when I've run the regression studies, it's not conclusive.
It's not showing.
Which was surprising. I'll be honest, it was very surprising when we ran those analysis internally. I thought for sure that I would find a 95% confidence level on those findings, and it wasn't there.
And then from a rate-setting perspective, even once we know the I&I, it's still, there's not an exact cost allocation formula that any community uses, because basically there's two key ways that we typically recover I&I. It's either in the volume rate or it's a per customer charge. And I can tell you, for example, St. Louis MSD is a client of mine, and they go through a rate-setting process where they do almost like, they have public hearings and everything. And this was a key issue 3.5 years ago when they went through their last rate-setting process. And they have interveners, and the commercial interveners, the large industrial interveners led by Anheuser-Busch, really pushed back because they allocate a lot of it to volume and a portion of it to number of customers, whereas the large industrial customers want to say, hey, it's more customer cost than a volume cost. Because it really is, because one of the largest sources of inflow and infiltration, and this is one challenge too that nobody's mentioned yet, one of the largest sources of inflow and infiltration is laterals, and the city does not own the laterals. And so it's a challenge. So even once we know what the I&I is, it's still up to somewhat discretionary to how it's allocated. And St. Louis MSD spent $120,000 to hire an engineer just to see if they could determine the split, how much split should be customer versus volume. In St. Louis, it's 60% volume, 40% customers. And the answer that Stantec, which is a large, respected engineering company, came up with was 60-40 looks about right. We can't say it better. I'm not kidding. One of the things they said is, well, it ranges anywhere from 0 to 80% throughout the country, and any of those numbers is reasonable. And so, and what you have to recognize is if we change it, what it results in is differential impacts, because what we've been doing is raising our rates, what we call across the board, so that basically when we're doing a 20% rate increase this year, it raises everybody's bill by 20%. Whereas if we were to do something to address I&I, it's going to result in, just depending on what you select, it going up more or less for different customers, which then can, introduces its own challenges.
Perfect. Council.
Thank
Councilor
you
Saber.
for that. With so much unknown, I'd be reluctant at this point to vary from what we did last year for the simple reason that we don't have a lot of basic information that we need at this point. And clearly, from that last study you cited, we may not be getting it.
No, and it's not, in the information, the surcharge piece is only a small piece of sewer, but in general, we know the financial condition of both the water and the sewer funds in general. And unless we want to subsidize them with gaming fund, these increases are necessary to keep them healthy. And you can see, I say healthy, but sewer is not super healthy.
Well, again, it's a city enterprise fund.
Yeah.
And I am in favor of actually supporting them with other funds if necessary. The city contributes to businesses, other businesses in many, many other ways. And to say that this fund should be exempt from any city subsidy is just counter to everything else we do. So to make it totally self-sufficient, as some of these numbers suggest, seems completely out of line with what we do for every other business in town.
Well, and that's certainly, that's a decision that
Yeah.
that's absolutely
that's my
your
position
discretion.
on this, yeah.
And it doesn't matter to us,
Yeah, I know, but that's my position.
We're happy to count whatever revenue you want, and it's just based on the direction last year is, the council said, we would like to have less subsidy of the utilities.
All right, further council member comments?
Do we need direction at this point?
No, I think, no, Kim. Kim would love that. Or I guess the question would be, are we fine with moving ahead with what we previously discussed, which is, I think, someone remind me, 20% water, 20% sewer increase this year? Yes, both equal this year, 20 and 20.
20 and
Is-
20.
Yeah, is the city council kind of directing staff to bring forward following the plan that's in the memo?
No, I mean, I think I see, there we go. I see enough.
Yes.
Was that a question or was that a?
Can you put back
there we
the sewer cash on hand chart?
Sure.
Because actually, like last summer, I remember actually trying to argue for like a less rate increase. And now looking at this, it's like, it would take us until 2025 to hit our target of 90 days.
Well, the lower rate increases we talked about last summer included greater levels of gaming fund subsidy.
Yeah.
And that's why they didn't, because obviously if we went with the same level of gaming fund subsidy and a lower increase, this would be negative, whereas to not be negative, it required more money to come from elsewhere.
My perspective has shifted in the last year, and especially looking at this chart, in that I was not in favor at the time of scenario 2, which we accepted, but I now am, because I can see how dire the situation is, especially with the sewer fund. I hate to raise rates on people, but then I think the residents especially need to keep in mind that the chart that you showed, that our rates are still relatively inexpensive in regard to the surrounding metro. And so, yeah, I would suggest just leaving it as previously determined.
Thank you. Actually, I will ask a couple more follow-up questions now. How much do we plan on putting in the budget next year for a gaming subsidy of either one of these funds?
So currently, the water fund is scheduled for 7.1 million. That is one a lime feed system project that's been in our 5-year plan for several years. The second one is somewhat part of the Burlington project. There's a water main that's approximately 3.5 million. Some of that is coming from some ARPA funds from the county. So hopefully.
Hey, the
but
county
rest-
ones have
but-
happened.
but any
County
other-
ones have
any other
happened, the state ones are tonight. There we
Yes.
go.
Yeah, yeah.
It's, okay, so outside of the capital improvements, we aren't, there's no gaming transfer in outside of capital improvements.
In this year's budget, we had 400,000 for a specific, I think, the 25th Avenue water main, but that's just for this year.
Okay, all right.
Those are all capital projects,
Correct.
right? Like operations are not being subsidized any longer.
Currently, no.
Okay. There we go. Further comments, questions? Seeing none, thank you for the presentation. With
Thank
that,
you.
we are adjourned. Boom.